Everything was perfect. He bought me this beautiful Tiffany & Co. diamond ring. The ring was a little big, so I decided to go in to get it resized. They took the ring into the bag and tried to pull up his information, but were unable to. After inspecting the ring, the manager comes out and shows me that it's not a Tiffany ring, saying there's no engraving on the inside. My first thought is he probably bought it used from someone and got duped. So when I got home, I asked him if he got it used and it's okay, but he flipped out on me, saying no, it's brand new from the Tiffany store. He got upset, saying I'm snooping around for the price of the ring. He told me I should have consulted him and he would have had it sized for me and that it feels like I'm going behind its back. So I did a little snooping. I went on his Amazon account and I saw that he purchased 2 rings. The first one was bought December 2nd, the one he gave me on Christmas, and then another one a size smaller last night. I'm not upset that he didn't buy me a Tiffany ring. I'm upset that he lied about it. I told him I didn't need the ring. He could have bought me a $200 14 karat gold band at Macy's and I would have been fine. Instead, he spent money on a box and 2 fake rings. He then confessed and said he got the box from his friend who proposed with a Tiffany ring. I don't know what to do.
When I was 16, my friend Lexi and I were trying to get super fit one summer. So we made a pact that we were going to swim around this one rock every day that summer. The swim wasn't that long, it only took like 15 minutes. But the rule was that you had to swim around the backside of the rock. You couldn't just go out and back. You had to go behind it. And the backside of the rock was always a little scary because once you got behind the rock, no one on the beach could see you anymore. So if anything happened to you, you'd be on your own. But we were ridiculously intense about it. Like we went turbo beast mode. We said that no matter the weather, no matter the size of the waves, the strength of the rip current, we would swim around the rock for the entire month of July every day. And we were super serious about this commitment. Like one day, Lexi ate a really bad pepperoni calzone and had the worst food poisoning. And she was literally shitting her pants. And I was like, Lexi, you don't have to swim with me today. And she still swam with me that day. Then one day, in the middle of July 16th actually to be exact, because I remember, we were swimming around the rock and something bad happened. So Lexi and I are swimming and we're like halfway through the swim on the backside of the rock. And while we're swimming, something hits me on the back. It literally felt like someone punched me underwater. And I scream and Lexi's like, what happened? But I was freaked out and I didn't explain it to her. So I just told her to swim to the rock, get out of the ocean and get on top of it. Once we were safe on the rock, I told Lexi what had happened and she was super freaked out. And I actually had a red mark on my back. So she knew I wasn't making any of it up. We stayed on the rock staring at the water, trying to spot anything moving for like 30 minutes. But after a while, we were like, okay, well, we have to swim back at some point. So we decided to swim in. We literally swam as fast as we could back to the shore. When we got to the shore, there was an old woman on the beach looking at us kind of weirdly. She's like, where's your other friend? And we were confused. We were like, what? She's like, you had a third girl swimming with you, didn't you? And we were like, no, it's just us. And she's like, well, I definitely saw a third girl out there with you guys. But then, a few days later, the local newspaper came out with a story titled Something in the Water. People at another beach a few miles away claimed that they were getting hit by something in the water. So people were claiming at this other beach in town that something was hitting them in the water. And they couldn't see what it was, but a few people had described the same sensation. The feeling of a really hard, blunt kind of punch in the water. So Lexi and I start to suspect that whatever's hitting people at that beach also hit me a few days earlier. And even though it was only July 19th, Lexi and I decided that it wasn't safe to swim behind the rock anymore. But I still would obviously go to the beach, and my favorite time to go was early in the mornings. And usually it would just be me at the beach at that time of day, but one morning I came down and the same old lady that thought that there had been a third girl swimming with us that one afternoon was standing there on the shore of the beach. She was just standing there with her feet in the water, but when I walked by, she turned around and she goes, "It must be a beautiful life out there. I bet they're happy." And then she bent down and picked something up from the sand and handed it to me. It was a type of shell that I had seen all the time. And she goes, "Do you know what these are? These are mermaid nails. We must have one living nearby this summer." And then she winks. A few nights later, I was at the beach again at a beach fire. And that's when I made a huge mistake.
Okay, so story time. So in March 2019, after 14 years, my parents split up, and then my dad proceeded to basically be a man whore and slept with multiple women. So fast forward to July, I move in with my dad. Then in October, he decided to settle down with my stepmom. Let's call her Susie. Susie was an alcoholic, and for about 3 months, she kept kicking me and my dad out. Until the 27th of December, she let me have my mate around, and we did karaoke with her 8-year-old daughter, and we were messing around on our phones. We were giggling and having fun. Susie thought we were laughing at her daughter, which we weren't, so she kept screaming in my face, and my dad of course took her side. She told me and my mate to get out, so we did. At this point it was 1 a.m. and my mate's house was on the other side of town, so we walked in the rain, and I was wearing a silk short and vest PJ set. My dad picked me up around 8 a.m. So on New Year's Day, my dad, for part two. So on New Year's Day, my dad proposed to her, and a few days later, she found out he was cheating. They split up, and later in January 2020, she sent me messages telling me to cut myself and end my life. Her knowing I had problems with this type of stuff. Up until March, it was quiet. My dad moved back in with her and asked me to move back in with him in April. I was staying at my grandparents' house, by the way. I said yes. I thought him asking me meant he really cared. Everything was happening good till my 13th birthday. Susie kicked me out, so I went to my mom's. Then I started to receive death threats. My dad later on proposed to her again, and later found out she was pregnant. They both went around my grandparents' house and started saying how I'm not welcome and it's all my fault and all that. My nan told me they said this, and me and my dad's side of the family are really close. So later on, in about early October, I started to cut myself again. And then in December, I went to Susie's for a night, and at that moment, like for part three. And at that moment, I was happy because I was with my dad and my stepsisters, and me and them got really close. So later in the night, we heard shouting, and my stepmom came down crying. She's about 6 months pregnant at this point, and I could smell the alcohol from her. My dad came down with 2 black eyes and a bloody nose. She then punched him in front of me and my 7-year-old autistic brother. Then my mom picked us up. My dad came back. But then again, he left us for Susie and her family. Now my brother is shouting, "Dad, get off him, no, come back," etc. And things are getting worse. I haven't brushed my hair since, and I just stopped everything. School, hygiene, sleeping, eating, and I've gone back to cutting. So guys, this is the end of the story. This isn't my story. I just wanted to come on and say that you never know what people are going through, so please be kind and be aware that there are multiple things that people could be going through. Love you guys. Thank you so much.
A heartfelt story of how in 11th grade I became a school slut. I just moved across country and started at a new school. I had exactly one friend. We'll call her Shady, because she was a shady fucking bitch. She started dating a senior boy and didn't want to hang out with me, which is fine. She got all these new cool friends, and they didn't like me because I was new and a girl, and I guess that's enough reason. Well, Shady started telling everybody that I fucked a bunch of people, and I was like, what the heck? Who? I literally sit at home and watch Harry Potter. I have no friends. Nonetheless, they'd taunt me in the hallways and be like, you slut. Or they'd follow me to the classroom and be like, we're gonna beat your ass. They'd message me on Facebook and be like, we're gonna kill you. And I'd be like, why don't you like me? And they'd be like, die. And I'd be like, okay, fair enough. So I got tired of the bullshit. I was like, I'm gonna become the one thing they fear the most. A real whore. So shortly after, I made one other new friend. His name was Juan, and he was great, and I loved him, and he would invite me to all the parties. I'd go to these parties to get drunk and make out with the guys that these girls liked. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty petty, but yeah. So when I would return to school after the weekend, they'd be like, you're a whore. I'd be like, true. There's really no moral to the story, but if you can't go high, just go really fucking low and beat bitches at their own game.
This is part 1 of the murders of Rich and Gail Brinks. On November 27, 1987, they attended a wedding and then returned to their home in Michigan. When they didn't show up for work, their families got worried and decided to check on them. When they walked up to Rick's car, they found something disturbing. There, they found Rick laying across the front seat, and he had been shot twice in the face. Rick and Gail did not have any enemies, and there was no obvious motive to this. There was also nothing stolen from the house, and it wasn't long before the case went cold. Years would go by, but then a cold case investigative unit was started in 2011, and it broke the whole case open. Follow for part 2. This is the murders of Rick and Gail Brinks, part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, definitely go watch that before you watch this. Right now, the case is being cracked open by a cold case investigative unit. They found a suspect. It was Gail's brother because they had a huge fight the night before. His alibi was his girlfriend, but there were so many inconsistencies that it wasn't a solid alibi. They also found out that 4 hours before the bodies were even found, Ryan, her brother, told a friend that his sister and husband were shot. He also brought his girlfriend to the crime scene to show her the bodies and told her that she would be next if she told. They believed the motive was jealousy because of everything his sister had and he didn't. He was charged of 2 counts of murder 26 years later and sentenced to life in prison.
The time I almost died. Story time. Let's start out by saying that I was 6 years old and my parents left for work. Actually, what happened was my mom went to work and she was a real estate agent, and my dad was supposed to be watching us and he went to grab his check real quick. So he left. Me and my 2 brothers were at the house, and my big brother Dylan and my little brother Chase, or not my little brother, he's the same age as me, I'm sorry. He was inside and he wanted to watch the TV, so he locked me and Dylan outside on the porch. While I was out there, I was like, hey, let me just go in the shed to look for my Chloe Bratz Barbie doll because I really wanted to play with her and she was blonde. So I opened the door to the shed to find my Bratz Barbie doll. As soon as I opened the door, a barbell weight of my dad's came out, hit me in the head, and it threw me to the floor, like for part 2.
Part 2 of How I Almost Died. As the weight hit me in the head, threw me to the floor, it landed right on top of my forehead, crushed my head into the concrete floor. My big brother Dylan freaked out and ran to the neighbor's house. Running out of time, part 3, I'll finish the rest of the story. Okay, last part 3 to How I Almost Died story time. So after my brother ran to the neighbor's house, he called 911. 911 came, and he also called my parents right after 911. And of course I rushed over, and my parents got into crashes before they came, and it was not that bad, so they could leave. So I got to the hospital and I was unconscious, and then when I got to the hospital, I woke up for like 1 second, and I remember it, and I just like kind of looked around and I was confused, and then I went back asleep, and I was actually in a coma for a few hours, and obviously they, tried to fix me, whatever hospital does. So that happened, and my parents finally got to the hospital, and I was still unconscious. I can't speak. I finally woke up after a few hours, probably like the whole entire day, and then I finally woke up at nighttime. I had to learn how to talk, walk, and do everything again, which took months.
This is the murder of Yara Gambrigio. Yara Gambrigio was 13 years old and lived in northern Italy in a small town of about 7,000 people. On November 26, 2010, she left to walk to a gym less than a mile away. She was supposed to drop something off and come right back home, but when she hadn't returned for hours, her parents called the police. 3 months to the day she disappeared, her body was found in a field, and the autopsy showed that she had been stabbed multiple times. They found male DNA on her body, but it was unknown. 1 year later, they found a man whose DNA matched pretty close. That's when they found a near-perfect match, Giuseppe Girani. He was the uncle. Now you think this case is closed? Wrong. Follow for part 2 to hear a huge twist in this case. This is part 2 of the murder of Yara Gambrigio. If you haven't seen part 1, go watch that before this. Right now, the police's prime suspect is Giuseppe Girani. They linked him through DNA. Now they think the case is closed, but they're wrong. Giuseppe died 11 years before the murder even occurred. Police then narrowed it down to being one of his sons, but all of their sons that they knew about were cleared. That was until a coworker told them that he wasn't exactly a faithful husband. They found a woman who had lied about coming into contact with Giuseppe, and she had 3 children. One was a match. His name was Asmo Basset. He was arrested 4 years after the murder occurred and sentenced to life in July 2016.